Writing. That moment during Leonor's latest appearance, the pause before she answered, the way palace officials immediately redirected reporters afterward, honestly, I think people missed what was really happening there. Because the question wasn't even about military training this time. It was about love, about whether Spain's future queen could ever choose a personal life without triggering institutional panic. And the silence that followed. That silence said everything. Because behind all the polished royal images and carefully staged ceremonies, there's a reality nobody talks about openly. If Princess Leonor ever seriously chooses love over the crown, there are strict unwritten rules waiting for her. Rules that could completely change her future. Not fantasy rules, not fairy tale drama, real royal consequences. And honestly, the deeper I looked into this, the more I realized something uncomfortable. Modern monarchies still fear emotional independence more than almost anything else. That's why this topic matters far beyond gossip. Because what happens when a future queen stops acting like a symbol, and starts acting like a real young woman with her own priorities? That's the tension the palace is trying to manage right now. And if you've noticed the shift lately, you're not imagining it. Leonor's image has evolved fast. A year ago, she was presented almost entirely as disciplined, prepared, military-focused, untouchable. But recently, there's a more personal curiosity surrounding her. People want to know who she trusts, who she talks to privately, who influences her emotionally, and that changes the game completely. Because royal institutions can manage schedules, they can manage press, they can even manage scandals. But feelings are unpredictable. That's why I think palace insiders are becoming increasingly nervous about the public discussion around Leonor's personal life. Not necessarily because of one specific person, but because emotional autonomy itself changes the power balance. Now here's the part most channels won't say directly. History shows that monarchies rarely collapse because of one scandal. They weaken when the public starts emotionally choosing the individual over the institution. That's why these love versus duty conversations matter so much. And honestly, if Leonor ever reached a point where she had to prioritize love over royal expectations, there are at least 5 major rules, spoken and unspoken, that would immediately shape her future. Rule number 1. The crown always comes first publicly, even when it doesn't privately. This is probably the hardest rule for modern audiences to understand because today people value authenticity so much. We're used to celebrities sharing emotions openly, influencers documenting relationships in real time, even politicians becoming more personal online. But monarchy doesn't work like social media culture. The institution survives by appearing bigger than individual emotion. That's why every royal relationship becomes strategic the moment it becomes public. And honestly, I think Leonor understands this more than people realize. You can see it in how controlled her public appearances still are. Even during moments where media speculation explodes online, she rarely reacts emotionally in public. That level of discipline isn't accidental. But here's my hot take. The more the palace insists the crown comes first, the more audiences emotionally root for Leonor's personal freedom instead. That tension is becoming impossible to hide now. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe, I post every day. And let me say something controversial here. I actually think younger audiences today would respect Leonor more if she openly fought for personal happiness rather than pretending duty erases emotion completely. Because modern viewers don't admire perfection anymore. They admire sacrifice with honesty. That's why even Prince William and Kate Middleton succeed publicly when they appear relatable rather than untouchable. The British monarchy learned that emotional connection matters more now than rigid formality. Spain's monarchy is still adapting to that reality. Now the second rule Leonor would face if love became serious. Privacy becomes almost impossible, and this one honestly feels brutal. The moment a future queen enters a serious relationship, the person beside her stops being normal instantly. Every photo gets analyzed, every friendship gets investigated, old social media posts resurface. Family members suddenly become public conversation. Imagine falling in love knowing your relationship could become national debate material overnight. That pressure destroys a lot of people. And honestly, I think this is why royal families become extremely cautious around relationships. Not just because of reputation, but because once media obsession begins, there's no real off switch anymore. Look at what happened historically across European monarchies. The pattern repeats constantly. Once emotional relationships become public property, institutions step in aggressively to manage narratives. That's why I don't think the palace fears romance itself. I think they fear unpredictability. Because unpredictability weakens control. And this brings me to rule number 3, probably the harshest one of all. Any partner must serve the institution too. This is where the fantasy completely disappears. People often imagine royal love stories as emotional fairy tales, but in reality, relationships inside monarchies become partnerships with constitutional consequences. That's a completely different kind of pressure. A future queen cannot simply choose someone privately and keep public life separate. The partner becomes part of the monarchy's image whether they want or not. And honestly, that sounds exhausting, because now every interaction matters. Every public appearance matters. Every facial expression matters. It's almost like living inside a permanent performance review. And I think this explains why palace advisors are obsessed with image management around Leonor right now. They know Spain's monarchy is entering a new generation where audiences expect authenticity, but institutions still rely heavily on controlled symbolism. Those two things naturally collide. Sometimes I wonder whether Leonor herself already feels trapped between those worlds. Because on one side, she represents continuity, tradition, stability. But on the other side, she's also a young woman growing up in the same digital era as everyone else. She sees how normal people live. She sees relationships built publicly without institutional oversight. That contrast has to affect her perspective somehow. And honestly, this is where comparisons with people like Mr. Beast become weirdly relevant. Hear me out for a second. Modern audiences reward authenticity and emotional openness more than polished perfection now. If Mr. Beast makes content feel overly corporate, audiences notice immediately. The same thing is quietly happening to monarchies. People don't want emotional robots anymore. That's why Leonor's moments of visible independence actually increase public fascination around her. Which leads directly into rule number 4. Every personal choice becomes political. This is the part one think most people underestimate. If Leonor chooses a relationship publicly one day, it won't stay personal for long. Media outlets will immediately turn it into a national conversation about the monarchy's future, stability, tradition, and image. And honestly, that's unfair, but it's also the reality of royal life. One relationship could suddenly trigger debates about succession, public funding, constitutional expectations, or whether the monarchy is becoming too modern. That's the hidden cost of royal visibility. And here's something I've personally noticed. The palace seems increasingly aware that Leonor's popularity now extends beyond Spain itself. International audiences follow her constantly online. Younger viewers especially see her less as an institution and more as a person. That shift matters, because once public emotional loyalty attaches directly to the heir instead of the institution, palace control becomes harder to maintain. That's probably why even small rumors around Leonor create massive reactions now. And finally, rule number 5. If she chooses love fully, she may eventually have to redefine what being queen even means. Now this is where things get really interesting. Because I don't think the old royal model survives forever. The era of emotionally distant monarchs is fading. Slowly, yes, but fading. Today's audiences expect transparency, vulnerability, humanity. And whether royal institutions like it or not, heirs like Leonor are growing up inside that cultural shift. That means the future Queen of Spain may eventually face a decision no previous generation handled in quite the same way. Can you modernize monarchy emotionally without weakening it institutionally? That's the real question underneath all these rumors. And honestly, I don't think anyone knows the answer yet. Because if Leonor someday openly prioritizes personal happiness, she could become one of the most relatable modern royals in Europe. Or she could trigger institutional resistance stronger than people expect. Maybe both at the same time. And this is where I think Queen Letizia becomes incredibly important in the conversation. Whether people criticize her or admire her, she clearly understands how fragile royal image can be in the digital era. Every modern monarchy has watched public opinion swing violently online over the last decade. One badly handled story can spiral globally in hours now. That changes how palaces operate. So when people say, why does the palace care so much about Leonor's personal life, I think they're asking the wrong question. The real question is, how much emotional independence can a future queen realistically have before the institution feels threatened by it? That's the tension underneath everything. And honestly, I think Leonor herself may quietly become the person who forces Spain's monarchy to confront that question directly. Not through rebellion, not through scandal, but simply by becoming too modern to fit comfortably inside older royal expectations. And if that happens, the monarchy won't just be managing a relationship story anymore. It'll be managing a generational transformation. That's why I keep saying this story matters beyond gossip. Because what we're really watching isn't just a young royal navigating love. We're watching a centuries-old institution trying to figure out whether emotional freedom can coexist with royal duty in 2026. And honestly, I'm not sure the palace has figured that out yet. Did you like this feature?